One of the number one reasons why women struggle with dating and relationships today is that they choose men who are not ready for anything real. Ladies, there are lots of great relationship-ready men out here. However, you need to learn how to choose them. I wrote this book to teach you how to do just that. Get your copy of Choose Well, a simple formula to determine the best man for you on Amazon today. Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize, I'm running late. I just got out of a session and my counseling day has ended. Good afternoon. I'm going to give it a second and see if folks can jump in. Good afternoon. But we are live here on Instagram. We're going to have a discussion all about a book that an author that I happened to meet when I was out in Las Vegas. He talked with me about his book, and we are going to discuss. We're going to discuss his book on this live because I thought it was pretty insightful. It was very enlightening and insightful, and I do believe that every man should read this book. Every man should be checking out this book. It's called The Bates Theory, and it's a guide to overcoming toxic mothers and male codependency. Okay, it's written by A.J. Williams. And let me see if he has joined yet, because we're going to talk a little bit about his book. But it is a topic that I have talked about quite a bit. And, you know, just about the relationship between mother and son, making sure that relationship is healthy and safe, that it is, you know, a healthy container in which for the son to grow in. So I've talked a lot about this. I've talked a lot about the emotionally immature woman, the emotionally immature mother. We've talked quite a bit about this. So once he is, let me see if I can request him to join. Hold on one second. I got to move this. All right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I just sent that invitation so AJ can join us. All right, there we are.
Hey, Miss
I
Anita.
get to put this back on my stand. Okay, good. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. All right, so we're going to have this discussion this afternoon. I had hoped more folks would join us. We'll see as we continue to talk, but this will be up on my platform. So hopefully they will see this either live or they'll see this, you know, after the fact. But we're going to talk a little bit about your book, which I found to be incredibly interesting and insightful. And I have talked to people on my platform about this subject, but AJ, tell everyone about yourself. Tell them a little bit about you and your bio and who you are and what you do.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you, Miss Anita, for having me on your platform. It was a pleasure. For those of you that were just joining us, I was lucky enough to meet her in person in Las Vegas. I was already a fan, and I was already following for quite some time because I'm on the subject. And I was on the bus, and she got on. I said, "That's Anita."
Yep.
So I went upstairs to meet her, and we were able to have a conversation, and that's how she was able to become interested in my book.
Right.
But I'm from New York, born and raised in New York, and I started my acting career when I was 2 years old. My mother was a Broadway dancer and actress, and she was the one who taught me and introduced me to that. And so I got a chance to do a bunch of things. I started off doing commercials, and my first big show was A Different World, for those of you who remember the first year of A Different World, when Loretta Devine was the dorm director. I played her son, JT.
Cool.
A few years after that, I was on All My Children for a number of years, and I got a chance to do some movies and operas, plays, things like that. But I always wanted to write, and I had been writing since I was pretty young, and I always had the idea to write and become a director and become a filmmaker. So I moved out to the West Coast a few years ago. I live here in Nevada, and I've been in the last few years. I wrote a couple of books, and this is my second book.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the reason I came up with this concept, it actually wasn't on my list of things to write. Is to use the cliche, it kind of wrote itself, right. But it actually did. I had no plans to write a book like this, but it was after being online and seeing all the discussions back and forth between men and women about relationships and about some of the things, particularly from women, that they're not seeing from men, right. And wondering why they're not seeing them. And I said to myself, I think that many women don't understand how we are raised, and what we're missing when we come up, so that they understand why we're missing certain qualities in the first place. And so I said, in my opinion, the way to attack any problem is to go to the beginning, go to the origin. And so I feel like if we go to how we're born, how we're raised, how we're brought up, then we'll be able to figure out why so many of our men are exhibiting X and Z quality.
Right. Know that, our mother is kind of the first nurturer. She's our first love, right? So that is the place to go. We have to go back to mom. We all came from her. Yeah. So we have to understand the dynamic of that relationship.
Very, very true. Very true. So you're a mom, right? So what was your impact from the book, reading it as a mom?
So that final chapter, I had to dive deep, and I made some notes in this book, so I had to dive into that final chapter. And just, are you a toxic mother, right? So I'm asking myself these questions, and I'm considering the relationship with my son. One of the things I would say that has definitely colored the relationship with my son is I was raised by a strong father. So I had a strong father, a strong mother, and I knew that I couldn't take him cross that bridge to manhood. Like, I knew that. So I made sure that he had plenty of men in his life that could usher him to that. And from the time my son was 12, I always tell people this, I started asking him questions. I started having him solve problems. I would have him order the food when we went out. I started teaching him all about, chivalry. I started giving him things to have ownership over. And I was, at that point, grooming him for manhood the best way I knew. Right. I started pulling back. He started washing his own clothes. He started cooking his own meals. I just started pulling back because I wanted to make sure that he could be self-sufficient, that he could be, living on his own, taking care of himself. And then, like I said, being raised by a strong father. I want all of my children to know that the day that they leave me is coming, right? You're not going to stay here forever. You're not going to take care of me. You're going to leave here. You're going to get married, get a spouse, have a family of your own, and that's your responsibility. So I think I've done a good job in the sense of my son has never been my little husband. He's never been someone that I've talked to about my personal life ever. He'll even tell you that. I don't know what she got going on. I don't talk to my son about my personal life. I don't talk to him about my problems. I don't parentify him. I don't make him my little husband. And I'm, grooming him to be self-sufficient, to be independent, to be a good man to the best of his ability, to work. He's has great work ethic. He's responsible. He's reliable. But yeah, we don't have any real toxic dynamic that I can see. I'm not one to be violent with my kids. I don't curse around my kids. There's things that just come with my character, right, that, I just don't do that, but I had to just ask myself those other questions. Like, okay, if he's dated someone, have I been territorial or jealous or, stuff like that. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that, okay, I think I'm on track for the most part. And my son and I, we did go through a contentious period, around 16 when he was like coming into his full testosterone. But guess what? I sent him to his dad. I sent him to his dad. I was like, okay, now you need to be with another man.
Boys in the
because you get slick in the mouth. So let's see you do it with him.
Now here's something interesting that I noticed when you spoke, and I did some videos a couple of years back when I first made the book along these lines, talking about this idea of what children need, both parents, especially the males, right? So when you outline the things that you were very conscientious in the things that you said when you were talking about what you felt he needed, pulling back, having to order in restaurants, do his own dishes, and things like that, order food, these kinds of things. But I noticed that the things that you mentioned were things that had to do with, for lack of a better term, performing, right? So as a man, we're supposed to perform. We're supposed to provide. We're supposed to protect. We're supposed to make the women in our life feel safe, right? What we leave out, though, is how to communicate, how to process our feelings, how to process anger, frustration, right? So these are some of the things that we hear the most when we talk from women, and we listen to women rather about their men. He doesn't open up, or when he open up, he blows up. He's never been to therapy. We see these things, right? And this is part of the reason why we need both parents. And I'll turn to myself for a minute. If I was raising a daughter by myself, I have two daughters, but I'm not raising them alone. But if I was raising them alone, in my mind, the first thing that I would think of is I would teach her how to fight. Right? So that's the first thing, you teach her how to fight. Second thing, you teach them about men, right? Because, again, they need to protect themselves, right? And the third thing on my mind would be to teach them about money, right? How to take care of themselves, how to manage money, how to earn it for themselves. And, of course, the spirituality would be in there to teach them about God, right? But that's what's on my mind as a man, because that's what I think is important. But as you know, as a woman, there's a whole lot of things missing off that list, right? So when it comes to the emotional, and it comes to what happens when her period comes, when her body starts changing, how does she manage her hair? How does she manage heartbreak when it happens from a woman's perspective? I'm not going to be able to teach her that because I don't have that frame of reference. I could read about it. I could ask the women about it, but I wouldn't be able to personally give her that. And that's why it's so important that two parents are present, because as well-meaning as you might be, as conscientious as you might be, you're going to miss things simply because you're a different gender.
That's right.
They're not the perspective that you're familiar with. So you might not even think them up.
Yeah.
When I'm left alone, it would seem simple. When I'm left alone with my daughters, doing a bun is a big task. I didn't grow up with sisters. So it's hard for me to do a bun. It seems like a simple thing, but it's not. You understand what I'm saying? So this idea, when we hear from the woman's side that you can raise a man and it can be done, yes, it can be done. But the question is, what do we define as done?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And as we're seeing all of these grown men that we have a problem with their ways, we have to ask ourselves, well, where is this coming from?
Right.
Why are they missing so many pieces? And so that's the point of the book. It wasn't just to, I wanted to help mothers that were raising sons, but I also, on the flip side, wanted to help grown men that might not realize the toxic influence that their mother has had or is currently having in their adult life, because I know men who have their older mothers in their lives making decisions financially with their children, interfering with their relationships, and an effect on them. And they may not realize that it's even having an effect because she's been there so long implementing these things.
Right.
So I think the awareness is the point. And we've gotten to a point in society where, and I'm sure you've noticed too with the work that you do, where the idea of having both parents in the picture, or having, rather to make it broader, having a male and female influence in a child's life has become something that is passe or is a choice, really. We can do it or not do it. But that's part of the reason why we're seeing so many of these men and women that are lacking so many basic qualities.
Right. And I agree. I agree.
Right.
So there's something in here. There's a couple things in here that jumped out at me. You had talked about the difference between a mom who was like a single mom. This definitely jumped out at me. So the single mom dynamic versus the married mom, or maybe mom is married to a step parent. Noticing the difference in that dynamic, but still, like you said, in your situation, it was you and your mom kind of there first, and then your mom married, and your stepfather came into the picture. But there was still always this understanding, like this doting, it's still you and me, you're my son, right? But you're right, I definitely see that in a single mom dynamic. That is, to me, really detrimental. So there's no stepfather. Yeah, that's not
right.
good.
And why is it detrimental? Because here's the thing. There are certain things, and I think this is how we don't approach this subject a lot of the times, because I've seen many discussions about single mothers from single mothers. What we don't approach is, regardless of the situation that the woman is in, there are certain things that she needs. She needs to be comforted. She needs to feel safe. And she needs certain things. She needs physical intimacy. She needs emotional intimacy. If there's not a man present to do that, her son will do.
Yeah.
And that, you understand what I'm saying? And they may not consciously think that's what they're doing,
Right.
but that's what's going to happen, especially if you're under times of duress. You know what I mean? And many times a single mother is under times of duress. Maybe your husband just left or he died. You understand what I'm saying? And, maybe there's homelessness, maybe there's, all kinds of trauma in a time where you need support if it's just you and the son. And what makes this different between a girl child and a male child is because a male child is going to grow into a man. So instinctually, even if he's not there yet, he's going to try to take it on. And how many times have you heard from young boys, that they're going to do this and that for their mom? You'll have an 8-year-old boy, a 12-year-old boy trying to earn to help her mom with the rent, his mom with the rent, trying to protect her from a potential assailant. Like, these are not things that a son should be doing. In our society, we've been trained to say that this is being a man, or even that saying that we know you're the man of the house. But this is a child.
Right.
This is a child who is emotionally developing and needs to have the support to emotionally develop properly.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times our men are catapulted into adulthood too early, trying to protect mom, trying to provide for mom emotionally and sometimes financially. And so they don't get a chance to grow up properly like they're supposed to. So by the time they become actual adults, we see all these behaviors and we wonder why. They haven't had a chance to fully process and go through the natural motions of being a child because they're trying to serve as mom's husband.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's why we talk about it. And I was cautious about doing this book because I know how sensitive this issue is. Because raising children, sons by themselves, especially in our community, and anytime you broach that subject, you risk, risk a lot of backlash. But when we're seeing the problems that we're seeing, we got to talk about it. And we got to talk about why it's so normal to engage in these behaviors and what it does to boys, that are becoming men. And we're seeing results now. In the last 30 years, we're seeing what it does.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an interesting dichotomy between the chapter on, being mom's emotional support, being her little husband, versus the bitterness that mom could feel if the son either looks like dad, acts like dad. So now we got a different dynamic. We have, just like your dad, it's a very bitter, non-nurturing, non-loving environment because you're a reminder of the man, that she had that left.
And
So
how many times do we hear that story?
Yep.
How many times do we hear the phrase, you're just like your dad?
Yep.
And if you're a subject like, if you're in a situation like mine and many others where you don't know that person,
right,
you don't even have a frame of reference to understand why you're making certain moves or why you're doing things a certain way. It just is, right?
Yeah.
So again, another reason why the single mother dynamic is it's so hard to have this conversation because it brings up the choices of the woman.
Right.
The choices to have unprotected sex. The
Yep.
choice to not get married before you have a baby. These are choices that have become normalized, but they have consequences.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you're a single woman, you can do what you want. You can absolutely do what you want in this life. But once you become somebody's mother, it's different
I
because
agree.
now your all your choices become the consequences. Your son has those consequences.
That's right.
So if
And
you
we don't talk
choose to
about
do
that.
whatever you want, right? We don't
Yeah.
talk about it,
We don't talk
but
about that enough.
it is the
Don't.
it is the whole point
Yeah.
because whatever he becomes, you have a large hand in that because of who you chose to be with and how you chose to continue that situation.
Right.
So, and for our community, the problem is that our men can't voice these issues because there will come a point where you become aware of certain things. And if we had the comfortability to be able to say to mom, hey, I felt this way. I feel this way about this. If that was normalized in our community, then that emotional health we would develop that a lot sooner. And when we came to the women in our lives that we were dating, we would be more emotionally mature and more healthy. But because we had that, what happens in this house stays in this
Yep.
house. We don't talk about that. We don't question mom.
Yep.
Mom is the hero because she had us and she struggled, so we don't question her. Because we had that dynamic, we can't ever exercise those things that are bothering us or that have become burdens in our lives because we're too scared to insult the Queen Mother.
Yeah.
And
And here's
so
the
a lot of men,
mm-hmm.
a lot of our men are walking around angry, resentful, don't know why, don't know who to blame. And even if they know who to blame, they wouldn't dare blame their mother. So where does that anger and resentment go? To the women in their lives.
Right. I'm working with a gentleman now, a young man. So I think he's 29. And he did therapy with his mother. I finally got him to bring his mother in. They had 2 sessions together, but they had a very toxic dynamic. They had a very codependent dynamic. And it got to a head because the young man was dating someone. He was about to propose. And the mother was like, she flipped out because she's about to lose her husband. She's about to lose her man to this other woman. And it got to a fever pitch where I was like, we're going to have to talk about this.
Right.
And so he brought her in. We had healthy conversations. I said some things that even the mom didn't like. Like I told her, I said, he's not yours. You don't own him. Because she talked in language that was very possessive. He's mine. He's my son. He's my baby.
Right.
And I was like, you don't own him.
Right.
Especially now, he's an adult. And
right.
But he got married 2 months ago. And he told me that his mom did not come. I don't think she came to the engagement party, but she did come to the wedding, and that they're still working through, his wife and his mom's dynamic because there was some conflict there. But I thought of him when I was reading the book, and I told him, I emailed him and said, hey, I'm going to, give you a copy of this book because, there's a lot of themes in there that you're going to be able to relate to. Yeah, but this is the thing.
And like I said, that's why I did it. I want to help our men shed some light on where some of that difficulty and resentment might be coming from. And because of the dynamics that we grow up with, a lot of the times we're not aware that that there could be any resentment. That's why I prefaced the book with those questions to help kind of slowly turn the light on for men. That there's a possibility that your mom could be harming you. And that's not something that we think about because, she's our first nurturer. She's our first love. She's the one that we see first. So how could mom ever be harmful? You'd be surprised, but you won't know until you ask those questions. And if you're seeing behaviors and language like you described, that's definitely not somebody that is having your best interest at heart because She's supposed to get you to a point where you can manage your own happiness and
Right.
you can take over.
Right.
And if she's in a position where her needs are not being met, because she doesn't have a man, then that's a personal problem.
Yeah.
That's not her son's problem. It really isn't. And in our community, we have been groomed to think that sons solve all their mother's problems,
Right.
even before they're fully developed.
Yeah.
They got to protect her. They got to help her. They got to save her. That is not a child's job.
Sure isn't. It sure isn't. And here's another thing that's interesting. I put a tab here where it talked about how the moms that their sons can do no wrong. Like there's no accountability. You know,
Right.
she's going to save, she's going to rescue, she's going to enable.
Right.
A lot of that.
Right.
And so, like I said in the book, the man's going to go out into the world and he's going to think his stuff don't stink. He's going to, treat people however or get in relationships. And, in his mind, his mom has always kind of had his back, even when he's wrong, and there's no accountability there. So I do tell moms, it's not about being on your son's side or your daughter's side. It's about being on the side of righteousness. That's what I've raised my children to know, that I am on the side of righteousness.
Right.
So if you're on the other side of that, I'm going to call that out.
Right.
That what you're doing does not align with what's moral, what's legal, and what's ethical. Okay? Right. Everyone knows that about me. Those are my 3 markers. So if my son goes out there and he kills someone or he does something dumb, it's not about being on your side or not. You did something wrong. Right. You did something wrong. But I notice a lot of moms struggle to do that. The son can do no wrong and, he could be wrong all day, but, they're not going to acknowledge that. But that's hurting their son. Very
much so. So as you see, you got a chance to read the whole book, and I tried to cover a bunch of different angles, not just one type of scenario, but a bunch of different angles so that people could see, mothers could see the different ways they could harm their sons in their development.
Yep.
And, again, we're always traveling to the origin, and you talked about having a strong father figure, which is very fortunate. But not having a strong father figure is another trigger. How would you know what that's supposed to look like without the strong father figure? So again, I see these comments online as we have more and more discussions about men and women, and one of the repeating comments is, why are we still talking about this? It seems like that seems like a smart and clever comment, but the reality is everything starts with relationships.
Right.
The building of a strong family starts with the building of a strong relationship.
That's
the raising of a strong, ethical, moral child that will become an adult starts with 2 parents that have that same goal, working together.
Yep.
So if we haven't mastered relationships, how are we going to master building strong families, which build strong communities, which build a strong race?
Right.
I mean, it seems like 1, 2, 3 to me, but for many people, it seems like it's difficult. It seems like they think we can build a society of a bunch of single, rich people, just doing their own thing. And we're somehow going to come together and be able to protect ourselves from everybody else that wants to eliminate us and wants to see us fail and destroy us. It's just not going to happen. We have to master families first, and in order to do that, we have to master relationships first.
That's
and in our time period, we just see people that don't see that connection. They think it's all about getting a bunch of money, and you don't have to work on these other qualities, and somehow we're going to become stronger and more together. I just don't get it, but hopefully we can do our part. And,
I agree with you. I told a young couple earlier today in their session. They got engaged 3 weeks ago. They're getting married on Valentine's Day. And, I told the husband, I said, I know that men in our world are taught about, money or fitness or status or whatever. I said, but the reality is you're trying to skip a step. You're trying to jump over a whole step to get to the bag or your career or your business. I said, why do you think it is the richest men in our world are married, but you want to skip that step? Okay. No, you have got to, like you said, develop healthy relationships, healthy marriages, healthy families, healthy communities. Like a lot of people want to skip that step.
And here's something that we got to put out there for people that are watching. I want to put an asterisk next to this. When we say this, we're not saying that everybody is built for marriage. Right. We're not saying that everybody should get married. But here's the problem. There are people that want to have children anyway, and that's the problem. If you don't want to get married, don't get married.
Right.
That's fine. But don't have children.
Right.
And we're going to say this in all caps for the women.
Right.
Because one thing that I found, and you know, you're a woman, you're a therapist, you're a mother, so I don't know if you'll agree. But one thing that I've found as a man and talking to other men is that when men feel like they're not ready, they're not ready.
Right.
So they don't do things when they're not ready. They don't get married when they're not ready. They don't ask for children when they're not ready.
Yep.
But women, on the other hand, will never turn down a marriage or a child and say, I'm not ready for this. Right. You understand what I'm saying? And that's the problem.
Agree.
You're always ready to jump into a job you're not qualified for. And you don't want to train for it. You don't want to change. You don't want to set it up so that it will succeed. And you're continuing to have children. That's the problem. If you're not built for that, then just don't do it. Don't have any children. Don't get married. Don't have children. But this idea that we can have children, especially male children, and not have any help or not have any plan, that's just wild.
Yeah.
And it's costing us the stability of our entire culture.
Yeah. But that's where we are, like you said. And I don't understand it either. My children were planned. I don't get it. I think it's 2025. We have lots of ways to prevent pregnancy. I don't understand it either. You know, I definitely was of the belief that, okay, when I'm ready to marry and have a husband, then I will plan and have children. And prior to that, I didn't have any children. Right. So I agree with you. I think that's elementary, but people have lost that. They've lost that. And I've even heard women, which it's just odd to me. Yeah, I don't know if I want to be married, or I don't know if I want a husband, but I want a baby. I want some kids. I'm like, huh?
Why do you want them? And I think I even say that in the book. Why do you want them? That's the question, because if it's not to build a family with a strong partner next to you, why do you want one?
Exactly.
And that's the question that we need to start asking, especially when we see young girls and we see them on this path.
Yeah.
And you know, here's the thing that's a lot of times that I find too. Women tend to have a stronger support network than men do. So a bunch of girlfriends, bunch of aunts, you know, grandma, they have more people talking to them and in their lives than men have a lot of the time. So this checks and balances can really happen and get to them before they make these decisions.
Right.
So we have to start in the women's community. They have to start checking younger girls when they're coming up, or women when they're saying these things, and tell them, you know, maybe this is not the best decision. Right. Maybe you don't have the qualities for this, or maybe you need to work on this or that. You know, because you're raising a whole human being.
You sure are.
And especially if you're raising a male human being, there's going to be really big consequences if you don't get it right. And
for sure. And remember, I keep telling people, you get one shot. You get one shot. There are no do-overs. Time is one directional. Right. So all of my kids now are, 22 and up. Yeah. And my job parenting is technically over. I have moved into more of a guide or mentor type relationship. I will always be their mother, right? But I am actively parenting my kids right now. They are legal adults. Right. So I keep telling people it's one and done. And that's why I was strict. People always said that. You're very strict. You're very no nonsense. I noticed you have a lot of rules, a lot of expectations. I'm like, yeah, because I only get one shot at this.
Right.
So I'd rather lean on that side of, definitely being more authoritative. Well, I consider myself to be authoritative. But I just leaned on that side of, yeah, I've got to make sure that, they don't go out here and do something that ruins their life. I said, yeah. And I made sure my son had plenty of male, there were men that I dated, his dad, my father, my two brothers, my uncles. I made sure, men in our church, I made sure he had plenty of men around, so he could see how men handle themselves and how they move about in the world. Right. Yeah, because I was like, I can teach you to be a good person, but they're going to teach you what healthy masculinity looks like.
And you brought up an interesting point, because that goes for your daughters too. Yep. It's just as important. I mean, how are they supposed to go and catch a good one, right, if they don't see it in the home?
That's right.
So this idea of, I don't need a man to not only help me parent my child, but I don't need a man as a woman, but I'm raising a girl child. How's that going to work? How's she going to know what to look for without seeing a healthy, emotionally healthy man treat you well?
That's right.
Take care of you well, talk to you in a certain manner. They're not going to know what to look for. So this idea of, getting rid of the man in the household, and we can just, yeah, you can do it. You know what I mean? But the question is that we're asking ourselves is, what does that look like when it's done? Right. And I think we're seeing it.
So one of the things that you had talked about in chapter 9 is, how do you move forward? So you figure out, okay, there's some things with my mom that are toxic, right? How do you move forward? How do you heal? How do you have a healthy relationship with her? One of the things you said was creating some distance, some separation between the two of you. And I made that suggestion also to the young man, that, he was seeing his mom like 3 times a week. And I was like, you might want to step back.
And here's the thing, just so people don't get the wrong idea, there's nothing wrong with having a good relationship with your mother, a strong relationship with your mother. The problem is when the relationship is symbiotic, right? Meaning that the two of you are feeding off of each other and not growing. Right. And the two of you are nurturing each other's bad habits and encouraging each other's non-growth. Mm-hmm. And so when that's happening, that's when you both might need to cut the cord. Right. And because the son is the child, he may not realize the need for that, because he's been systematically programmed to serve the mother's needs and to serve a certain role. So he might be the one that has to make that cut. Right. Because for her, as you just described in your scenario with your patient, he serves a purpose. Mm-hmm. So she's not going to cut it. Nope. You understand what I'm saying? And more than likely, her life's not growing if she needs him to play that role. Right. Because if her life was progressing as it should, he would. You just said it yourself. Your children are now more of a mentor. You're more of a mentor role. You're no longer hovering over them. You're no longer needing that constant contact. So that's an indicator right there, a red flag right there, that her life, her emotional is not progressing as it should. Right. So there's already something that needs to be addressed if she needs her son that much. Right. Yeah. And one of the things you stated was about mom not having a significant other, right? So she doesn't have a man in her life. She doesn't have a significant other. But again, like you said, that's not the son's fault. That's you to bear the brunt of that consequence, because you didn't go out, you didn't find a man, you didn't marry. That's on you. You're saying it. You're saying it. I'm not saying it, right? But here's the thing. The reason why that's an important part of the conversation is because you do have needs. Yeah. No matter how much you might be bitter, no matter how much you might have been scarred in the past, no matter how much your thinking is a certain way, you have needs. And when those needs are not met by a man, a grown man, that's your significant other, there's going to be consequences to that. That's right. And you could think of some very practical consequences. I mean, what if you're in a situation where you need something done with your house, or you're harmed and you need somebody there? You're going to call your son from out of his wife's presence to come bail you out. I mean,
Exactly.
and this happens all the time, and it's become normalized. You know, he's leaving his wife to get in the car to come drive you to the doctor, to put up your storm windows, to, you know, it's like, that's not his role, especially if he's taking care of another woman.
Exactly.
So how, this is why a lot of our men are crazy, because they might have two baby mamas, and if they're somewhat righteous man, a decent guy, they're taking care of them. They got the current woman and they got their woman. That's four people on the payroll. Then they got their children. So there's all these people pulling energy from them before they ever get to themselves. Right. And if you're talking about our community, we've not talked about therapy except for in the last 5 years or so. Yeah. So that's not even a conversation that we grew up with. So there's things that need to be processed and addressed. So there's all this energy going out and nothing coming in. Right. That's why a lot of our men are suffering emotionally. Yeah. Because they're serving all of these people. And that's the proper way of things. You know, it's become, in society, it's become how we've addressed it. But if you, I know you're a woman who reads the scripture, so you know what the line is. And it works because it's been set up. That's right. It wasn't set up for the man to be the center of the universe, serving everybody around him. Right. It goes in a hierarchy. That's right. So because we're not doing that, man gets burnt out. And a lot of times he says, not doing it anymore. And he disappears. And everybody's wondering what to do. Exactly. And so again, when we're talking about that mother dynamic, if you choose not to date, a man may not be the center of your universe. That's fine. But you have to understand that there's going to be consequences. And you can't pass that on to your son because you don't have anybody to protect you, or you don't have anybody to help you in the house, or you don't have anybody to drive you around. That's not your son's job. Nope. You're supposed to get a man. That's the way it's set up. And I have even talked to, so not just the male children, the female children. Like, I've had to have that talk with my mother and let her know, like, when I was in committed relationships and was traveling and doing different things, and she was calling all the time or texting all the time, I said, Ma, I'm in a committed relationship. This is my priority. I said, you've, chosen not to remarry. She's a widow. And I said, and you've chosen not to remarry. And so I'm going to do what I can, but I can't be there to be your husband or do whatever he would do. Like, that's a part of you choosing not to remarry. Right. So yeah, that cannot be put on me. But you would not believe how many men come in and the wives are upset about the mother-son dynamic. And the man says to me, well, I feel like I'm in the middle. And I always say, you're not in the middle. What are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, I'm in the middle. I mean, no, you're not. Right. The scripture makes it very clear whose team you're on. Okay. Right. And that's the part where I talk to the men. Right. You got to show some backbone. You got to set some boundaries. You understand what I'm saying? If you've told a woman that you're the person in her life and you're going to protect her, you have to live up to that. Yep. And part of living up to that is setting boundaries with mom. If you don't do that, you're not a true leader. Right. You understand what I'm saying? Because you set the tone about how far mom can go. And right. I even hear it in these conversations, who rides in the front seat? Who do you rescue from the fire? It's like, when you see some of these answers, it's scary. It's scary. The wife is like third. I'm like, oh. Yes. I'm like, okay, so the mom goes first, then the daughter, then the wife? Wow, okay. I don't know where it comes from, but it's definitely not right. It's not right. Where it comes from is that single mother dynamic. Right. Because if a father was there, you would see the hierarchy and it wouldn't be questioned. But when you and mom are like this from the beginning, then of course you're going to think mom is the one that you save first. Right. Right. But we need to readjust the whole viewpoint. Right. And it starts with having proper relationships and having the proper dynamic come back. Yeah. I was married to an infamous mama's boy and, didn't realize it initially. But when I did, I was fully in the marriage. At one point she lived with us. And that's when it became clear that they had a toxic mother-son dynamic. So she's a single mom. He's her only child. Like, I mean, this thing is set up perfectly. Oh, man. And in her world, that is her husband,
right? This is my man. This is my husband. How dare you try to come along and marry him and have a family? She has been a constant in his life, and he's been married 4 times.
Ooh.
And she just, everywhere he moves, she moves. Everywhere he goes, she goes. And she's made it clear to all of the wives. She made it clear to me that she wasn't going anywhere, and that it didn't matter that I was married to him. She would always be there with him. And I was like, okay, baby, you can have him. You can have him now.
That's a tough order to try to fill. Because like I said, it's not your job to fight with him. If he doesn't set boundaries from the door, then you know that that's only the tip of the iceberg.
And it got worse. I was like, man, I had no idea how bad this was. Yeah, it was bad.
So hopefully that's a byproduct of the book as well, that women who are looking for men can spot some of these things too. Because if a man has that kind of relationship with his mother, odds are it's not going to change, and you don't want to be a part of that until he figures out how to set the boundaries and change it, because it's just inviting problems for you.
I agree. And I wished I had dove a little deeper, but initially I thought it was cute. I was like, oh, this is so cute. He talks to his mom multiple times a day, and he clearly cares about her and respects what she thinks. And, I thought it was cute, but as time went on, I saw how toxic it was. I was like, man, this is really toxic. This is horrible.
Let us be clear to the people that's listening. Having a close relationship with your mom is not the problem. Caring about your mom as a son is not the problem. The problem is the lack of boundaries. You understand what I'm saying? When it starts to go past where it should be, especially if it's an adult male child that's out of the house.
Right.
I'm saying there's definite boundaries on how much they should be seeing each other and how much he should be doing for her.
Exactly.
Especially if he's in a committed relationship with somebody else. That's the problem. So we don't want people to come away from this and think, oh, they're speaking against mothers and sons being close. That's not it at all. Yeah. What we're talking about is a lack of boundaries, where we don't know the difference between a mother and son being close and a mother-son being in a relationship.
Right.
And
I agree.
You can be in an emotional relationship. A lot of people feel like a relationship is just sexual. Mothers and sons can be in an emotional relationship.
Yeah.
That started long before you came along. Mm-hmm. So you got to know how to spot that.
Right. All right. I'm going to see if there are any questions, any comments for us before we wrap up. I was trying to go back and look at some of the comments. There were some really good comments. This is so true. Unfortunately, in the Black community, the cycle has to stop. I appreciate how you're approaching the topic responsibly and with care. Yeah, there were some really great comments.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone have any comments, any questions for the author? I want you all to head over to Amazon. You can get a copy of the book. I want you to support a Black male author. Is that too much to ask? and when I tell y'all this is a 2-day read, maybe, like, come on. I want to see more of our men read. I want to see more our people read, but I definitely want to see more men read. But this was a really quick read. It was, kind of straight into the point. Like I said, there's some things in there that you may see yourself, those dynamics. And so, good questions for you to ask yourself. Start developing some boundaries.
And it's okay. That's the thing. That's the number one thing, is it's okay to ask questions. Yeah. Because that's the beginning of changing things. That's the beginning of making the strides that you need to make in your life. So don't be afraid to ask yourself questions. And if you find that some of these things align with you, great, you can do something about it. Right. That's the beautiful thing about life, that as long as you're aware, you can make changes.
That's right.
And so that's what I'm hoping to help people to do, because it's the silence that's killing us. It's the not talking about these issues that's destroying our community and destroying our families and destroying our relationships, that we can't talk about these subjects. Right. We can't talk about mom. We can't talk about the past. We can't talk about what went on in our homes. That is not healthy. It hasn't been healthy. It hasn't worked for us. And we're seeing the effects of it in mass now. Oh, yeah. So that means that we need to change the way we do things. That's right. And the beginning of that is asking questions about our upbringing, asking questions about our relationship with our mother and our origins so that we have a better understanding of ourselves and what makes us tick, and then we can do something about it.
Okay, we had a question here. What about mothers and daughters and their toxic relationships? I made an entire series over on YouTube. It's called The Emotionally Immature Woman. I want to say it was a 5-part video series. I did talk at length about that. Again, you're going to have a twofold dynamic. That first dynamic is the jealous or envious mother. The competitive, the mother who competes with her daughter, you're going to have that dynamic. Or you may have the flip side dynamic, which is mom who dotes on her daughter and loves her daughter, but can also be a little possessive, can also see her daughter as her friend, right? Her closest friend and confidant, and she kind of parentifies the daughter. She turns the daughter, instead of, like you said, being the adult in the situation, she now treats the daughter as a friend. And I always tell people my children are not my friend. You're not my friend. You are not responsible for me or my household or my feelings or each other. I'm responsible for you all. I'm the adult in the situation. Absolutely. So I want you to head over to YouTube and look up The Emotionally Immature Woman. I did a series on it, and I did talk about the toxic dynamics between mother and daughter.
And I want to let everybody know that's listening too. Along those lines, when I first put out this book, if you go to my page and you scroll down to my reels, I have a series of videos that talk about the book in depth. I love movies. I'm a big fan of movies, so I use some of the biggest toxic mothers in movies that I know. Mommy Dearest, Throw Mama from the Train,
right.
Carrie from Carrie, her mother. So, I use a bunch of movies there so that we get a visual of what that looks like. Right. And a lot of those relationships are with their daughters, but with sons as well. So we can actually see the overly religious mother, the two different children in Boys in the Hood. Right? He loved one and disregarded the other. Like there's so many dynamics that we could talk about. And sometimes it helps if we see the visual, because if we're not that mother, then we know mothers like this. Right. And so we can pinpoint that behavior and say, well, I don't want to be like this. Let me be cognizant of certain behaviors. Or if I'm dating a man who comes from this dynamic, do I want to be involved in that? And so we can so scroll down if you're interested on the reels on my page, and there's a number of videos just going deeper into the subjects with different mothers and their dynamics. But I'll definitely leave that to the female writers, because I don't want to talk about something I don't know about. I talked about it from a male perspective, but there are female writers that have definitely broached that and examine that deeply, because it does exist, and it does. And for us that are men looking for wives, we have the same problem. We can take on a wife that had a mother who was toxic as well, and so we can experience the same consequences. So this parenting thing is really, it's not willy-nilly. It's not a small deal. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal.
It's very important. And you know what jumps to my mind? I'm gonna give a modern day reference when you said that about the parenting, whether it's the mother or the father. What jumps to my mind, and y'all gonna know when I bring you this example. I want you to think about Erica Mena, and I want you to think about Safari. Think about how toxic. Think about how toxic those two people are. And they now have 2 children together. Like every time I think about them and I hear something about them, my heart breaks for their children. Like,
and there's numbers of them.
Oh my God.
The culture that we watch celebrities, we know them, we follow them. There's a number of couples that are really concerning for children coming up, male and female children.
Yeah. I mean, call CPS. Yeah. No, 1,000%. And they're posting this stuff. And I'm like, this is like a CPS level situation. It's not okay. And yeah, my heart just breaks. But you know, one of the things that I realized, and God showed me this, how I knew we were in trouble as a society when we no longer saw children as the most vulnerable, most important resource. When we started to do crazy things regarding children, I was like, it's over.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that, because one of the key moments for me was when Sandy Hook happened. When I saw how quickly society went back to normal after seeing 5 and 6-year-olds murdered on the front page, I realized that we had lost all sense of shock and shame, and just, I mean, that should get anybody pause. People went right back to work. I mean, this is like, so that's just where we are.
It's sick.
And so we personally have to make an effort, for those of us that are aware or becoming aware, to change some of these dynamics in our families and in ourselves, so that we can make new pathways.
For sure. For sure. This has been a great conversation. Thank you, AJ,
for having me.
Yes, tell everyone more about you, your Instagram, if you have any other social media where they can find you, and then about your book.
Yes. Okay, so my full name is Amir Jamal Williams. I write under AJ Williams. So both of my books are on Amazon right now. You can get them. The link is actually in my page on Instagram. My Instagram is the author of all, one word, the author of all. And so if you follow me, the link to the books is actually, is it there? No, I have a short film there. I'm sorry. But yeah, my new short film is there, because I change it from time to time. So if you want to find the books, the name of the book is The Bates Theory, A Guide to Overcoming Toxic Mothers and Male Codependency. It's available on Amazon and Kindle and hard copy, so you can get it there. But just, you know, follow me at Amir Williams on Facebook for more updates of upcoming projects. You know, and I'm always talking about, you know, this dynamic. So just follow me there and you'll see.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you joining me today. My hope is to have more of these lives. You know, I used to do this quite a bit, and then I stepped away and took a break. But my hope is to kind of get back on track doing these lives and introducing people to authors, to other creatives, people out there who are in the space, because yeah, especially if you're doing something positive, especially if you're talking about a subject that we need to be paying attention to. Like we need to read this. So it is my honor to be able to, you know, have people come on the platform and talk about it.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for your support. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. If you're watching this on YouTube, please give it a thumbs up. I'm going to put the author's information in the description box below this video. And you want to head over to Instagram, the author of all, or you want to follow him on Facebook, and you want to get a copy of this book. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a great Saturday. Yes. And as always, stay open to love.